Tembisi Levers before for 2-on-1. We're going to look at the current consideration of the Reserve Bank in reviewing the prime rate and the repo rate. Basically, when you're looking at the prime rate and the repo rate, you're looking at the basic risks that occur. Basically, it's a risk concept of saying that the frameworks at which they're applying to measure the current risks and the constructs, do they really reflect the current status quo of the economy? You must understand that realistically, the basic fundamental risks that are used to define your repo rate and your prime rate are dependent on the status quo of the economy and where the economy is. Now, the biggest question that has been growing since the pandemic was, does the assessment, one would say geopolitical, we have geopolitical or macroeconomic factors and indicators that determine the risks that are carried by a nation. So when you're going to look at your fundamental construct of your interest rate, so in the light of the changes in the post-COVID economy, are those risks reflected as what they are? That's the first concept. That's on a general. Usually when I explain such a concept, I'd look at it from a quantitative perspective and a qualitative perspective. So when you look at it from a qualitative perspective, the logic, you say the geopolitical factor and the geopolitical environment factors, macroeconomic indicators, do they reflect the current stance of the economy? Now you must understand that when the economy changed after the post-COVID economy, most of the fundamental frameworks and approaches changed. So when you go look at they actually said that it's 2 decades since this has happened. They're saying it's 2 decades since this has happened. Now you are going to look at a fundamental analysis that goes to, it would be trend or statistics when you go to it, to try and reposition the economy. What we're doing here, we're trying to reposition the economy where it is supposed to be, so that the prime and repo plays a role that it fundamentally is supposed to reflect. There's an analysis I've made recently saying that when you look at international borrowing and you're looking at your domestic borrowing, there's always a common factor that is called risk. So when you're looking at domestic loan, you go borrow it to a bank, they'll have a risk factor that is usually comprised of your credit profile when as an individual. Same as you go into international banking, when international lending, when as an institution you go and make borrowings as a country or institutions from that particular country, they focus rather now on your credit rating as a nation to a certain extent. They look at the credit rating of a nation. There at the bank, they're going to look at the risk profile. So in the construct of your scoring system, when you're looking at the bank, it's going to be that. But then if you're looking at borrowing from other country, you're going to start looking at a factor that is related now to the what you call this credit profile, risk rating, the A plus ABB credit rating. So when you look at the two concepts, the credit rating concept would closely bring you close to the macroeconomic factors and geopolitical factors and the implication of the post-COVID economy. Once you go there to the implication of the post-COVID economy, you'll start realizing that most of these factors and indicators have drastically changed, and the approach towards them has drastically changed. So as much as you go into your individuals, repo rate, your prime rate, when you, is it prime? Did I say prime? Repo and prime. When you go to your internal credit ratings then. So you'd want to apply the same concept that and frameworks now. Now we're going to frameworks. We're no longer talking the numbers alone, but we're saying the entire framework, that was the considerations that were put, that were being thought of when you're saying that. You understand? So fundamentally, that is. But then there is a concept. Like when I was modeling, when I was modeling a scoring system recently. I was modeling a scoring system. The concept became a bit broader. It went to what was I talking about in that concept? I was going to the statistical implications. Yeah, no, that's I'm not writing someone's PhD, but it is a concept very interesting, because now they are going to the framework itself. So you're saying the fundamental constructs and considerations. So that's a qualitative overview of the problem. But then once you get closer to the quantitative thereof, then it's going to start having some statistical implications. You can't answer it without looking at your statistical implications when you go to that. Now you start going to, maybe you'll find that there are concepts and models that are already developed too, but logically approaching it from a normal head perspective, there are statistical ways. Even now, there is there is, what do you call this? There is a way of following up that you can work on it. There is a way of following up that you can work on that when you're looking at this particular concept. You're gonna look at your, what would you call it? I'm not talking that one. That one is beautiful when I go to modeling. I remember when I was drafting even that investment portfolio, when they spoke about prime plus. I remember when I was drafting the model, we had to go to an interest. When you're saying that, okay, what is the interest rate that we're going to put here? Prime plus, not prime, is it prime plus, prime, is it inflation plus, inflation minus, plus one, plus two? That also had implications, and that had to have an implication. So the main question here, it is the post-COVID economy. So whatever that you're going to make as a driving force, whatever that you're going to make as what do you call it? A focus point is going to be saying the post-COVID economy, unless there's another concept that would be applied when you go into this, because they're talking 2 decades. We're talking 20, they had the millennium, two decades. You're talking the new millennium. You're going to, but maybe it's a different concept, because of, if you would, you'd expect some drastic, but ordinarily we say we don't focus much. We're just saying the post-COVID and the changes in frameworks now. Now we're going to changes in frameworks, not just the qualitative, so not just the discrete number, sometimes not even just the first derivative. Our logic here would go to even the second derivative when we look at this question. So we question the first derivative sometimes and the second derivative. So both principles are very important in this particular. So it's more of a principle perspective, that which principle are we applying, which direction. So it's a model perspective. So it's not an easy question, but it is a very relevant question. It's a question that arose. I started focusing on this question. I think it's 2 years back. Before that, like 2 years back, that's when this question started having a problem. I remember I was drafting. I was modeling some program there. It was a portfolio. I was busy with portfolio management. It was an investment model that I was busy with. It's a very good question, and it's a something that one could do. But if you could case it for research, you can try for research perspective and saying that you're going to look at it, but the framework will always be unique. And the framework will always show you where you're supposed to go. 10 BC, FSP 54211.